So you're looking into paint booth designs. Maybe you're weighing the build versus buy options, or that buy option was never gonna cut it. Well, I'm Dylan, this is Punker Builds, and I'm gonna be building a steel paint booth. I'll also be covering how I arrived at some of my design decisions. I'm fortunate enough to live in a creative household where my girlfriend and our roommate like to sculpt, paint, and work on all kinds of other projects. The three of us are definitely going to put this spray booth to use, but this design is really for our roommate who needs this rig for airbrushing. Although this is specifically for her, and she covered all the material costs, all three of us will be using this booth, so I want it to be versatile. This design is probably a little over the top for the average crafter, but I'll do my best to explain how I chose the blower fan, CFM requirements, and the hazards I'm trying to minimize. This piece is the mounting plate for the blower fan. The bolt holes match the ones on the fan, and the opening is for the exhaust. Since you're here, it's probably safe to assume you're a maker or a creative type. You've probably seen the wide array of DIY cardboard, foam core, or plywood paint booths rigged to a bathroom fan. I don't want to discredit those. They definitely work for a lot of people and have a low barrier to entry, but they make me nervous, and they're usually only about 100 CFM. Our booth uses a 549 CFM blower fan, and I'm always prepared to go out of my way in the name of due diligence if it helps me sleep at night. No matter what I'm building, my design process usually starts the same. I begin with a handwritten list of constraints. There's one requirement that almost always finds its way to the top of the list. The design must fit through a standard 36-inch wide door frame. We're planning on putting this booth in our basement, so it needs to disassemble into a top and bottom section that are easily carried. Once it's in the basement, the two sections are joined with 6 screws. We chose a semi-downdraft design so that the booth has a smaller footprint. I contemplated adding handles for easier carrying, but again, we didn't want the booth to be any bigger than it needed to be. I bought a bag of these light-duty leveler feet, but quickly discovered they were apparently no duty, and they all broke. I ended up replacing them with significantly better ones. Initially, we wanted this booth to just catch acrylic overspray, but quickly got on the topic of thinning paints with alcohol and acetone. We realized that we didn't want to be restricted to only non-toxic paints. I don't paint a lot of things, but when I do, it's definitely with oil-based spray paints. So I started digging, and I set out to design the safest booth I reasonably could. These are called tech screws, and I'm about to use a lot of them. They are self-drilling and tapping screws. Every one of them is tipped with a little drill bit, and their threads are strong enough to force their way into metal. This expanded mesh is going to be the actual work surface inside of the booth. It came with really sharp edges. I knocked down some of the burrs with a wire wheel, but what really helped was the sandblasting I did before we painted it. Now that the frames are done, it's time to get started on all the sheet metal pieces. Now, I'm not an engineer, an electrician, or an HVAC technician. I'm a journeyman welder, and I have a bachelor's degree in jewelry design. Definitely consult your local codes and regulations and take anything I say with a grain of salt. I will tell you what I did, but I am not an authority on this. My local codes take directly from the standards written by the National Fire Protection Association. If you're looking, that's a good place to start. So that's where I'm getting my information, and although these codes are specifically for industrial auto body paint booths, this is where I'm at least getting my flow rates. Professionally, these things need to be actually engineered because it's more complicated than just flow rates, but this will still be a lot safer than a cardboard or plywood booth. I make a lot of paper templates for jewelry parts. Those parts are small enough to use a regular white glue stick to attach the pattern. Using glue sticks is great because the paper pattern will rinse off the metal with just water. Since these parts are bigger, I'm using spray adhesive, and it works well enough for cutting, but I found it really frustrating to clean off the metal afterwards. The point of this booth is to capture overspray and vent the remaining fumes and vapors outside, though there's two hazards I'm trying to minimize with this build as well. The first is definitely fire. For a fire to start, we need three things: air, fuel, and ignition. The blower is capable of supplying 549 CFM of air, so we definitely have air. The paint is where the fuel comes into play. Oil-based paints have thinners in them to make them liquid. Thinners, alcohol, and mineral spirits are all flammable. Then there's spray paint, which typically uses propane and butane as a propellant. The way these fuels are handled in a spray painting booth is to so severely oversaturate the fuel with air that they can't reach their lower explosive limit, or LEL. If this were properly engineered, the goal would be to never have more than 0.25% of that LEL. This is why the volume of air in our booth is important. After the paint is cured, it isn't considered flammable, but it can be combustible. So a buildup of paint won't be the source of the fire, but it can definitely add to it. This piece is a sort of adapter for the ducting that comes off of the blower. This is just so I can connect some round flex hose to the rectangular opening on the fan. When it comes to ignition sources, we're looking at electrical, heat, and potentially static. The main risk with electrical comes from the blower's motor, but we'll get more into this in a bit. Essentially, we don't want a fuel-to-air ratio flowing over exposed wires. So the important thing is to get the right kind of blower. The most prevalent heat source that could be found in a paint booth might be the lighting. The solution is to only use LED lighting, no incandescent bulbs. As for static, this whole thing is steel. To prevent a buildup of static, everything needs to be properly grounded. Ideally, the blower fan would also have plastic blades to not generate static, but the one I ended up buying has steel blades. So the core design is intended to reduce the risk of fire, but in the event that there is one, my go-to solution is to construct things entirely out of steel. That way, a fire would at least be contained as best as possible. It's also important to have a working smoke detector, a fire extinguisher, and we won't be leaving this running unattended, just in case. Now to assemble the sheet metal with a couple hundred tech screws. The second main hazard I've considered is one that I don't hear enough people mentioning. It's something called depressurization, and we'll get into that in a bit. I've been doing builds like this for quite a while now, and I've really been enjoying making videos about them. If you like these types of projects, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment because there's lots more to come. There are tabs where the top and bottom halves of the booth screw together. I'm notching the sheet metal to go around them. A serious and invisible risk is something called depressurization. In Canada, our homes are sealed up fairly well to deal with the cold winters. Our natural gas-fired furnace runs almost all year. When air is forced out of the house by a ventilation system, like a kitchen's range hood, the displaced air has to be replaced from somewhere. The weakest link could be the furnace, where the air rushing in to equalize the pressure of the house accidentally draws carbon monoxide back into the house from the furnace exhaust. Where I live, it's required to have heated makeup air for any exhaust fan over 300 CFM. If you're looking for information on this in your area, it'll be related to codes for kitchen range hoods. Since we're venting out a window, our solution is to have an unrestricted opening in the same window we're venting out. There's 3 things to note about this. The clean makeup air must be upwind from the exhaust so it doesn't come right back in. For this, we'll use a hose on the exhaust that we can go outside and position downwind. Second, we won't be able to use this booth on cold days. And lastly, we have to make sure that we have carbon monoxide detectors and that they work. Before we talk blower fans, let's find the needed CFM for the fan. I first need to know the surface area of the face opening. In this case, width times height. For a typical cross-draft design, where the air moves horizontally to a filter on the back wall, we would use the area of the face in square feet times 100 feet per minute. But this is actually a downdraft or a semi-downdraft design. Because of this, gravity is on our side and we can get away with as little as 50 feet per minute, which leads us to a required 428 CFM. Now this CFM minimum is supposed to be achieved after taking into account the resistance of the filter and the air in the duct, which I did none of. But the blower I'm using has 549 CFM, so I can lose up to 120 CFM due to resistance and still meet the minimum. Now let's talk blower fans. These 2 squirrel cage blower fans are very similar in their specs. I already own this one, but there's a reason why we're not using it. These fans suck air in from the sides and force it out this way. The issue is that this motor is directly in contact with the airflow. You can actually see right through to the copper windings of the motor. This blower moves air the same way, but its motor is not in line with the airflow. The issue is, a spark across the windings or heat could potentially start a fire, so we're better off just having the motor out of the way. I sharpened a lonely Allen wrench I had hanging around and used it to scribe through the holes of this spacer. The hole placement has now been transferred for drilling. I used more tech screws to hold this spacer on, but ended up changing these to bolts later. This is the driver for the LED lighting. It and the motor get hardwired in. This outlet is for the airbrush compressor, plus one extra plug. To mount the LEDs, I made some brackets and riveted on the clips that came with some aluminum channel. The channel holds the LED strips and has diffuser covers for more even lighting. Now that everything has been put together, I'll tear the entire booth apart, check for sharp edges, and reassemble while sandwiching silicone caulk in every joint. We then took it to a place that offers DIY sandblasting where I was able to, affordably, do it myself. And lastly, we painted it. Between the top and bottom sections, I added foam weather stripping for a better seal. For a filter, we're trying out a high micron furnace filter. This is the window exhaust unit. We have hoses for the exhaust, and the top hole is the unrestricted makeup air. Excellent. We have plenty of makeup air coming in, plus the booth is really comfortable to sit at. Now to smoke test it. This is a tap handle for draft beer. It's a plastic cast of a female warrior I sculpted by hand. I've included bars at the top of the booth so we can hang parts to be painted. And this is the final test. Some rattle can oil-based primer. The booth did an excellent job. It contained all of the overspray and took all of the fumes outside. The only thing left to do is add the airbrush compressor. I hope you liked this video, and I'm really happy with how the booth came together. Thank you for watching. Cheers.